What up, boys? Today I wanted to talk about 2080 Ti in SLI and on its own as well, and its performance. I came back from 1080 Ti SLI hybrid SC2s, and I just wanted to compare them in a way and maybe talk about topics such as thermals, power usage, SLI scaling, acoustics, overclocking. So without further ado, let's get to it. So about a week ago, I bought 2080 Ti and SLI from Nvidia because every single other place had them out of stock. I originally wanted to buy hybrids, but I thought the colors improved on the Founders Edition, so I thought I'll give it a shot. I like how they look, and they're a little bit cheaper than the other ones, so I gave them a shot. The thermals are not as bad as I thought they would be. But that's to be expected with the improved cooling solution. Once I crank all the fans up to 100%, the GPU stays at about 62C, which is great for Founders Edition. But it's 62 to 65 degrees, so there is a small variance. It depends on what case fans you have, the case itself, the airflow. But when it comes to my case, I have 6 industrial Noctua fans, and each one is 3000 RPM. And yes, it does feel like helicopters taking off when they're all at 100%, but they do move a lot of air, and I do wear headphones when I play games, so I don't really hear it. I tested the GPUs when the fans are all cranked up, and 2080 Ti fans spin at 3700 RPM, and those fans are not exactly very loud. I mean, they don't bother me, but I think they would bother other people, because I know not everyone keeps the fans, the microphone right next to the system. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to place the mic 1 meter away from my system, and I'll crank all the fans up so you can see the difference between stock and basically cranked up fans. So yeah, let's get to it. The microphone now is placed 1 meter away from the system to create more like a realistic scenario. So right now, what you can hear, all the background noise, is the PC at stock. No fans cranked up, just stock. And now when I crank the SLI fans on, so all 4 of them, this is what it sounds like. The next thing I wanted to touch on is power usage. So when the GPU is at stock, it does use its 260 watt power limit. And when overclocked, the GPU uses about 315 to 320 watts. And the settings are as follows. I'm just gonna point the camera at my settings and show you what kind of settings I'm using when it comes to the overclocking, which will also be used a little bit, well, the settings will be used a little bit later on to explain the overclocking difference between the cards that I have. So that's the kind of settings I'm using for both of the cards. 160 to the core, 550 to memory clock. Fans usually at 100%, depends if I'm playing games or not. Power limit cranked up to 123% and voltage plus 100. The voltage helps a bit to sustain the higher clocks, hence why I'm sliding it all over to the brim. Now, when it comes to SLI, these cards take about, or use about, 800 watts, and that's the entire system, according to my HX 1200i power supply. And if overclocked, CPU is pushed, aka joins the chorus, the system will eat about 1000 watts flat. But obviously that's unrealistic scenario because CPU will almost never be pinned at 4K. It's usually it's going to be about 40% usage. So the system usually eats at around 850 to 800 watts during gameplay or when I'm benchmarking. I think during gameplay it actually takes less power because sometimes the SLI scaling is not greatest, so they use less power. And the CPU I'm using is 2700X overclocked to 4.2 GHz at 1.3 volts. When it comes to SLI scaling, it's a little better than previous generation. I never really complained about SLI, but I understand other people's concerns. I had 780 Ti in SLI, I had 1080 Ti in SLI, and now I have 2080 Ti in SLI. So for instance, I play The Division, the game I usually play. It scales quite well. The scaling is about 75 to 80%, depends on the area you're in. And my PG348Q ROG Swift monitor that I'm using to game most of the time. I also have PG279Q, which is 165 Hz, which I usually use as well. But this is my go-to because I like the widescreen aspect of it. And the 2080 Ti's have no problem sustaining it at 3440 by 1440 resolution at 100 Hz with G-Sync. And the FPS doesn't really drop below 95. Sometimes the particle effect will drop it slightly below that, but you don't really feel it at all. It usually just stays flat 100, but that's to be expected, I'd say. I know the monitor's a little bit underwhelming for 2080 Ti and SLI. I should get 4K 144 Hz one, but they are at the price that I don't see it making sense. So I just wanted to stick to the ones that I currently have, because I used to have 4K display, and I just don't see that difference or between 4K and 1440p. I mean, there is a difference, it's just doesn't impact me much, if that makes sense. But when it comes to frame times as well, it's about 10 milliseconds, from 7 to 10. They vary sometimes. When it comes to two of these cards, I sort of won and lost the lot 3, the silicon lot 3 at the same time. One of the cards peaks at about 2100 megahertz, which is great, and they peak at around 2070 on average with the same overclocking settings as the other one. But unfortunately, the other card only maintains about 1980 megahertz, so it's around 100 megahertz difference between the two. So obviously, when I'm running them in SLI, the slower one is dragging the faster one down. But I guess in SLI it doesn't really make a difference, so I should be okay with that. And next, I'll show you guys a little bit of the Division gameplay and comment a little on how I feel about the performance in that game. I'll also at the end show and explain some Heaven 4 benchmark scores that I recorded previously for each of the cards, to show the Heaven benchmark scores, which I recorded at 1440p ultra settings, so you guys have an idea of how the performance looks, so you can compare it to your own graphics cards or other systems. Okay then, so we are in Division. The OSD is up, as you can see, and we will have a little walk around to see if I can find a fight, to see if the FPS drops at all. We are currently playing at 3440 by 1440, 100 Hz, V-Sync on, G-Sync on. So as you can see, one of the GPUs is at 60 degrees and the other one is at 56. The frame times are about 10 or below that. Fans are at 100%. Excuse the noise, by the way. SLI scaling is about 70% to 80% at the moment, which isn't actually that terrible. So you can see the FPS doesn't really drop much, or at all, but that's to be expected. As you can also see that the GPU utilization is about 75%, which is quite nice, because the temperatures are also quite a little bit down. Now we are getting slight FPS drop to 95 as expected. 88, but it's only very brief. So it's about 95 to 100, but I think the case, well, I think because I have VSync on, the FPS varies very slightly. That could be wrong though. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah. It's quite an enjoyable experience at 100 Hz, with all settings cranked to ultra. This is actually 100, I just had to edit the file in Division because the Division has a little problem. So it is an actual 100 Hz and 100 FPS, as you can see in the OSD here, from Riva Tuna. So the next bit I'll show you is my overclocking results and Heaven 4 benchmark pictures. So this is my first overclocking result. This is one of the better GPUs that I have. It's the second one that I bought, which managed to get a quite high overclock of 2085, but it managed to get past it actually, and I didn't actually try to push it any further. But I think that the second GPU is a decent silicon, so I was quite pleased with it. Alright guys, I'll try to keep this one short. As you can see, the second GPU that I bought managed 2.1 GHz, and I think that's a great result considering it's a Founders Edition card and temperatures are not the best. It clocks about 100 MHz higher than the first GPU that I bought, and the GPU temps were between 57C and 67C respectively when benchmarking in Heaven 4. But that's with all fans at 100%. Frame times are also great, between 5 and 10 milliseconds. This is the completed benchmark run, which shows how good the GPU is. I managed to get about 120 FPS and 3041 score at 1440p Ultra, which tells me I might be running into a CPU bottleneck at this point, as you'll see in a second, but we'll get to that. Here are the settings I used in MSI Afterburner, all cranked up except for core clock and memory. I heard that GDDR6 memory has issues, so I don't want to push my luck. Apparently, some cards are artifacting, so I keep this one as is for now, as I think it's due to the memory, as some users have reported on various forums. I was using 411.70 drivers for this GPU and the other one also. This is the benchmark run for the first card that I bought, and as you can see, the scores are similar to my first GPU. So as you can see now, this tells me I might be running into a CPU bottleneck with my 2700X, which is overclocked to 4.2 GHz, but I'm not sure. 9900K is just a little bit too expensive, and with Ryzen 2 on its way, I decided to wait. This screenshot shows that the first GPU usually stays between 1980 and 2025. Not the best, but nothing I can really do. This GPU will drag the other one down in SLI, unfortunately, and the temps were the same for both cards. Lastly, SLI Heaven 4 results. Obviously, you can see that the score is not double, as it shouldn't be, but it is a very good score nonetheless. With this, I'll conclude my little review here. If you have any questions, please ask me in the comment section. I'll try to answer all of the questions the best I can. And if you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. And I hope this review helped you to decide which one you want to get, or maybe you're just curious when it comes to the numbers. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.